The antique mirror I bought cheaply at the flea market started showing me not myself, but corridors of a mysterious hotel. The next night, when I looked in the mirror, my reflection winked at me with a terrifying smile on its face. I've always had a weakness for antiques, especially those with history. My small apartment had become something of a museum for unique finds, each piece carefully arranged to tell its own story. The vintage typewriter from the 1920s, the Art Deco lamp, the weathered leather suitcase with faded travel stickers. Each item I'd rescued from obscurity, each with its own tale to tell. It was tucked between rusty garden tools and water-damaged books at the Sunday flea market. A mirror with an ornate wooden frame decorated with intricate carvings of pine trees and mountains. The glass was slightly clouded with age, giving it that authentically vintage look I loved. The seller, an elderly man with nicotine-stained fingers, couldn't tell me much about it. "Hotel clearance," he muttered, not looking up from his newspaper. "Place shut down decades ago. Got a lot of their stuff cheap at auction." "Which hotel?" I asked, examining the craftsmanship. He shrugged. "Someplace in the mountains. Closed in the 80s, I think. Bad business or something." At $40, it was a steal. I didn't even haggle. Getting it home was a challenge. The mirror was heavier than it looked. I cleared a space on my bedroom wall opposite my bed and mounted it securely. It transformed the room immediately, lending an air of vintage elegance to my otherwise modest space. That first night, I fell asleep admiring how the moonlight played off the mirror's surface. I dreamed of long corridors with red carpets and golden elevators. I woke suddenly at 3:17 a.m. according to my bedside clock. Something had disturbed my sleep, though I couldn't identify what. The room was quiet except for the gentle hum of the heating system. My eyes were drawn to the mirror. In the dim light, something seemed off about my reflection. I reached for the lamp but stopped my hand halfway. The mirror wasn't showing my bedroom, instead of reflecting my room with its cream-colored walls and cluttered bookshelves. The mirror displayed a long hotel corridor with patterned red carpet and vintage wallpaper. The perspective was as if the mirror was a window looking down this hallway. I sat frozen, unable to look away. This was impossible. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, even pinched myself. The image remained unchanged, a hotel corridor where my reflection should be. I slowly got out of bed, approaching the mirror cautiously. The corridor seemed to extend deeper as I came closer. I could make out details now. Room numbers on doors, ornate light fixtures painting of landscapes on the walls, all with a distinctly vintage 1970s aesthetic. I reached out my hand to touch the glass. It felt solid, cool, and normal, yet the image remained that of the corridor, not my hand or bedroom. Suddenly, the lights in the corridor flickered. A door at the far end opened just a crack. I yanked my hand back, stumbling away from the mirror. As quickly as it had appeared, the strange vision vanished and my ordinary reflection returned, looking pale and shocked. I spent the rest of the night with the mirror covered by a sheet, unable to sleep. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was just a vivid dream, or perhaps a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. The next evening, after a day of work, I'd almost forgotten the strange incident. Almost. The sheet remained over the mirror, though I felt silly looking at it. Eventually, I pulled it off, chiding myself for being superstitious. The mirror showed only my normal reflection. Of course it did. I went about my evening routine, preparing for bed, occasionally glancing at the mirror only to see my ordinary movements reflected back. I was nearly asleep when I felt compelled to open my eyes and look at the mirror once more. The hotel corridor had returned. This time I didn't panic but watched with a strange fascination. The corridor was the same, but now I could see more details. Room numbers: 217, 219, 221, a service card outside one door. The carpet was a geometric pattern in red and orange. As I stared, I noticed movement at the end of the hallway. A figure had appeared standing motionless, too distant to make out clearly, but it appeared to be a person looking in my direction. I sat up in bed, my heart racing. The figure in the corridor began walking toward the mirror, toward me. As it approached, I could see it was a man in a dark suit with a red waistcoat. His face came into view and I gasped. It was someone who looked exactly like me, but with subtle differences. His hair was styled differently, his posture more rigid, his smile too wide and unnatural. He stopped a few feet from what seemed to be his side of the mirror, staring directly at me. Then, slowly, deliberately, he winked at me, his smile growing impossibly wider, revealing too many teeth. I scrambled out of bed, nearly falling in my haste, and threw the sheet back over the mirror. My hands were shaking violently, my breath coming in short gasps. The next day, I called in sick to work. I couldn't bring myself to remove the sheet from the mirror, but its presence dominated my apartment. I spent hours researching mirrors and their folklore, learning about superstitions and tales of mirrors as portals, most dismissed as primitive fears or psychological phenomena. I also searched for hotels with similar decor to what I'd seen. The red carpet, the distinctive wallpaper. It took dozens of image searches before I found something similar. Photos from the infamous Overlook Hotel, a remote mountain resort that had closed in the 1980s after its caretaker had suffered a psychotic break resulting in multiple deaths. The carpet in the photos matched what I'd seen in the mirror. That night, despite my fear, I had to look again. I removed the sheet, steeling myself. The mirror initially showed only my reflection, looking tired and afraid. But as the clock ticked past midnight, the image changed again. The corridor appeared, but from a different angle, as if the mirror's perspective had shifted. My doppelganger was waiting much closer this time, standing only a few feet from the glass. He wore the hotel staff uniform, now complete with a name tag that read, "Jack." "Who are you?" I whispered. His mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear. He seemed frustrated by this, putting his hand against the glass. I found myself mirroring the gesture, raising my hand toward his. Just before our fingers would have touched across the glass, I pulled back, suddenly aware of the danger. He frowned, his face transforming into a mask of rage. He pounded silently on his side of the mirror, the glass vibrating with each impact. I backed away as he continued his assault on the barrier between us. The glass began to develop tiny fractures, spiderweb cracks spreading from the point of impact. In panic, I grabbed the heaviest thing nearby, a bronze bookend, and considered smashing the mirror. But some instinct stopped me. Breaking the mirror might break the barrier completely. Instead, I covered it again, this time securing the sheet with duct tape around the frame. Even through the covering, I could feel the impacts as he pounded from the other side. Eventually, it stopped. The silence that followed was almost worse. I didn't sleep. I researched the Overlook Hotel, learning about its violent history. The original caretaker, Jack Torrance, had claimed the hotel was alive, somehow filled with spirits that had influenced him. Before his rampage, he'd been seen talking to himself in the hotel mirrors. The next morning, I decided the mirror had to go. I'd dump it somewhere far from my apartment. I approached it cautiously, removing the sheet. My heart stopped. The mirror no longer showed the hotel corridor. It showed my apartment, but not from my side. It was showing my bedroom from the perspective of someone standing where the mirror should be. And I wasn't in the reflection. I heard a noise behind me. Slowly, I turned. He stood there in my apartment, my double from the mirror, wearing the hotel uniform, his smile too wide, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "Thank you for the exchange," he said, his voice exactly like mine but with a cadence that was all wrong. "I've been trapped in there so long. The hotel needs a new caretaker now. Your turn." I tried to run, but my body wouldn't respond. I felt myself being pulled toward the mirror, an impossible force dragging me. My fingernails broke as I clawed at the floorboards. The last thing I saw was my apartment from the other side of the glass, my doppelganger waving goodbye as he settled comfortably onto my bed. Now I walk the endless corridors of the Overlook. Time passes strangely here. Sometimes I see others trapped like me in various mirrors throughout the hotel. Sometimes I see the outside world when someone hangs a new mirror on their wall. I've learned to wait patiently, to smile invitingly at my reflection, to promise a simple exchange. After all, everyone wants to see themselves in a different light. And I just need to find someone willing to trade places. Next time you buy an antique mirror, look closely at your reflection. Is that really you looking back? Or is someone else waiting for their turn to step through? I found an old voice recorder and cassettes in the attic of my new house. During quarantine, when I was overwhelmed by loneliness, I started listening to the recordings. My blood froze when the voice at the end of the first tape whispered my name. The real estate market's collapse was my opportunity. After years of cramped apartment living, I finally purchased my first home, a charming Victorian fixer-upper on the outskirts of Millfield. The previous owner had died without heirs, and the bank was eager to sell. At half the market value, I couldn't resist even with the necessary renovations. I moved in mid-March 2020, just as the world shut down due to the pandemic. Perfect timing in a way, stuck at home with nothing but renovation projects to occupy me. I attacked them with enthusiasm, stripping wallpaper, painting walls, and refinishing hardwood floors. Being alone didn't bother me at first. I'd always been something of a loner anyway. The attic was my final frontier. By mid-April, with the rest of the house transformed, I climbed the narrow stairs to tackle the dusty space under the eaves. Decades of forgotten items awaited me there. Old furniture, yellowed newspapers, broken toys. Archaeological layers of previous occupants' lives. That's where I found the recorder. It was in a cardboard box alongside 12 labeled cassette tapes, each marked with dates from 1983. The recorder was a bulky portable model with large buttons and a carrying handle. Surprisingly, when I inserted batteries, it still worked. I brought everything downstairs, setting it on my kitchen table. The box also contained a small notebook with handwritten logs corresponding to each tape. According to the first entry, Thomas and his assistant Carolyn had been investigating acoustic anomalies in the house at the request of the then owners. My curiosity was piqued. By then, the isolation was beginning to wear on me. No visitors, no social interactions, no human voices except those on my TV. The prospect of listening to real people, even from nearly 40 years ago, was strangely comforting. That night, I settled into my armchair with a glass of wine and pressed play on the first tape. Static crackled, then a man's voice emerged, professorial and precise. April 3rd, 1983. Initial investigation of the Keller residence, 147 Elm Street. Present are myself and my assistant Caroline. Time is 7:42 p.m. A woman's voice followed, younger, more energetic. We've set up recording equipment in the main living area, kitchen, dining room, and master bedroom, based on the owner's reports of sounds. The tape continued with them discussing microphone placements and technical details. Occasionally they'd fall silent, then whisper about faint sounds I could barely discern through the tape's hiss. About 30 minutes in, their tone changed. "There it is again," Caroline whispered, like someone walking upstairs. "The owners are away, correct?" Thomas asked. "Yes, they're staying with relatives during our investigation." Silence followed, then a sharp intake of breath from Caroline. "Did you hear that?" Her voice was tense. It sounded like someone whispering. They fell silent again. I strained to hear whatever had alarmed them. At first there was nothing. Then faintly I detected it, a soft whisper too indistinct to make out words. "Let's check upstairs," Thomas suggested. The recording continued with their footsteps climbing stairs. Their breathing seemed louder, faster. "The sound is coming from behind this wall," Caroline said. "Wait, isn't this where the sealed room is supposed to be?" "According to the floor plans, yes," Thomas replied. "A storage space that was walled over during renovations in the 1950s. More silence, then a sound like scraping or scratching. "It's getting louder," Caroline whispered. The scratching intensified, becoming more frantic. Then abruptly, it stopped. "Make a note," Thomas said, voice clinical, despite his quickened breathing. Acoustic phenomena seemed to respond to observation. When we acknowledged the sound, it intensified, then ceased. The tape continued for another few minutes with them discussing theories and plans for the next day. Then Thomas gave a sign-off and the recorder clicked off, except it didn't. After a moment of silence, a voice whispered, different from either Thomas or Caroline. It was thin, sibilant, like dry leaves scraping together. "Alice," it whispered. "My name." I dropped the recorder, stumbling backward. My name. A recording from 1983 had spoken my name. It was impossible. Sleep eluded me that night. I told myself it was my imagination or a coincidence, but I knew what I'd heard. Despite my unease, I found myself drawn to the tapes the next day. The second one began similarly, with Thomas and Caroline setting up equipment and discussing the previous night's events. "We've brought more sensitive microphones," Thomas explained, "and we'll attempt to establish communication if the phenomena return." This session, they focused on the walled-off room upstairs. They tapped on walls, measured temperatures, and set up what Thomas called trigger objects, items that might provoke activity. About halfway through the recording, Caroline gasped. "The temperature just dropped 10 degrees, she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Right in this corner." "Make a note of the time and location," Thomas replied, his scientific demeanor intact, though I could hear tension beneath. Then came a sound that made my skin crawl, 3 distinct knocks from what seemed to be inside the wall. "Hello?" Thomas called out. "We mean no harm. We're here to communicate." Silence followed, then 3 more knocks, louder this time. "If you understand me, knock twice," Thomas said. 2 clear knocks responded. Caroline's breathing was audible now, quick and shallow. "Thomas, I don't think—" "This is remarkable," he interrupted. A clear, intelligent response. "Can you tell us who you are?" The knocking stopped. Instead came that whispering voice again, still indistinct, but somehow closer to the microphone. Thomas pressed on, asking questions, receiving knocks in response. Then he asked, "Why are you here in this house?" The whispering intensified, becoming a harsh rasp. Suddenly, Caroline screamed, "It's in the room! Thomas, it's here!" Chaos erupted on the tape, scuffling footsteps, a door slamming. Then, Thomas's voice shaking, "End of session. We'll resume tomorrow after analyzing tonight's data." The recorder clicked off. Then silence, followed by that same whispering voice. "I'm waiting for you, Alice. In the walls." I nearly threw the recorder across the room. This couldn't be happening. How did a decades-old recording know my name? Know I would be listening. I should have stopped, then packed the tapes away, or better yet, burned them. Instead, I found myself loading the third tape with trembling fingers. This session began differently. Thomas's voice was subdued. Caroline's nowhere to be heard. April 5th, 1983. Caroline has declined to continue the investigation after yesterday's events. I'm proceeding alone, which I acknowledge is against protocol. His footsteps echoed as he moved through the house setting up equipment. He spoke to himself, reviewing notes, theorizing about the nature of the phenomena. The entity seems to exist in a non-linear time frame, he muttered, responding not just to current stimuli, but appearing to have knowledge it couldn't possibly possess. The recording captured hours of Thomas working alone occasionally, addressing the empty air with questions. Nothing responded, until the scratching started again. This time it was everywhere, walls, ceiling, floor. Thomas's breathing quickened. "Who are you?" he demanded. The scratching stopped, then that voice right next to the microphone. "I'm the watcher in the walls. I see across time." Thomas's scientific composure cracked. "What do you want?" "To be heard," the voice whispered. "To be remembered. Each listener carries me forward." "I don't understand," Thomas said. "You will," the voice replied, "when you join me." The tape ended abruptly. This time there was no whispered message to me, just silence. I couldn't sleep that night. Every creak of the old house, every whisper of wind seemed to carry that voice. I considered leaving, driving to a hotel, but the pandemic restrictions made that impossible. I was trapped in the house with whatever presence had spoken on those tapes. The next day, I resolved to find the sealed room. Armed with the floor plans I'd received when purchasing the house, I located where it should be, behind a wall in what was now my home office. Sure enough, the wall there sounded hollow when tapped, a slightly different texture than the surrounding walls. I didn't dare break through it. Instead, I returned to the tapes, loading the fourth one with a mix of dread and compulsion. Thomas now sounded exhausted, defeated. April 6, 1983. After yesterday's contact, I spent the night researching the house's history. There was a family here in the 1920s, the Merritts. Their youngest son, Edgar, disappeared while playing hide and seek. They found his shoes outside the wall of what was then a storage closet. The father claimed to hear scratching inside, but by the time they broke through, there was nothing. Thomas's narration was interrupted by a phone ringing. He answered. "Caroline, what's wrong?" Pause. "Slow down, I can't understand." Longer pause. "That's impossible, you're not making sense." I could hear Caroline's voice faintly hysterical on the other end, though I couldn't make out words. "Listen to me," Thomas said firmly. "Stay where you are. I'm coming over right now." The recorder captured his hurried footsteps, the door closing, then silence. "Until he won't make it in time," that whispering voice said. "Just like I knew you would listen, Alice. Just like I know you'll come to the wall." The tape ended. This wasn't possible. Yet tape after tape, the evidence mounted. Something in this house existed outside normal time, perceiving future events and somehow knowing who would hear these recordings decades later. The fifth tape contained only Thomas returning to the house hours later, frantically calling Caroline's name, then breaking down in sobs. "She's gone," he kept repeating, just like the voice said. The sixth tape was different. Police interviews, Thomas trying to explain the investigation, the officers clearly skeptical. They mentioned finding Caroline's car abandoned at a scenic overlook, notes about voices in the walls scattered across the passenger seat. Tapes 7 through 11 documented Thomas's deterioration. He became obsessed with the wall, with communicating with whatever was behind it. He spoke about dreams where he saw Caroline trapped in darkness, scratching to get out. The final tape, dated April 17th, 1983, began with Thomas's voice, barely recognizable, rough with exhaustion or something worse. "I understand now," he said. "It doesn't just exist in the walls. The walls are a conduit. The recordings too. It travels through sound, through voice, through memory. Anyone who hears becomes a vessel. Silence then. I've sealed the wall with salt and iron, written warnings in the floor plans, but I know it's not enough. It knows who will come here. It's always known." A sound of scraping like furniture being moved. "If you're listening to this, know that I tried to warn you. But you're already carrying it now just by listening, and it wants out." The tape ended with a crash. Then silence. That night I lay awake, staring at my bedroom ceiling. The house creaked and settled around me. But was it just the house? Every small sound made me flinch. Just after 3 a.m. I heard it, a soft scratching from inside the wall. I told myself it was branches against the siding or mice in the attic, but it continued, rhythmic, deliberate, then whispers too faint to understand at first, gradually becoming clearer. "Alice," it called, "I've been waiting." I buried my head under pillows, but the voice continued now inside my head. "The wall, Alice, come to the wall." I resisted for 3 more nights, barely sleeping, the scratching and whispering growing louder each night. On the 4th night, I gave in. Taking a hammer, I approached the wall in my office. The scratching intensified as I neared, vibrating through the plaster. With trembling hands, I struck the wall. Plaster cracked, revealing old lath behind it. I struck again and again until I'd opened a hole about a foot square. Nothing but darkness beyond. I shone my flashlight in, revealing a small space, empty except for dust and cobwebs. A child could have hidden there once. Disappointment and relief flooded me. There was nothing supernatural, just an empty space and old recordings that had played on my isolation-frayed nerves. Then my flashlight caught something on the far wall, writing scratched into the plaster. I leaned closer to read it. "I knew you would come, Alice." Below it, a second message in different handwriting. "It's too late for me, but not for you. It travels through sound. TW." And below that, dozens of names scratched in different hands. The last was Caroline. As I stared, frozen, the flashlight began to flicker. In the strobing light, I saw something forming in the darkness of the sealed room. A figure composed of shadow and dust, its edges billowing and reforming. It had no face, but where a mouth should be was a black void that whispered my name. I stumbled backward, dropping the flashlight. In the darkness, I heard movement, something emerging from the hole in the wall, something that scratched and whispered. I fled the house that night, driving until dawn. I never returned, never collected my belongings. I left the country as soon as travel restrictions lifted. I wonder who will find my recording someday, and I wonder if they'll hear their name whispered at the end. The clinical trial I joined for my sleep disorder required me to spend 30 days in a restored ward of an abandoned psychiatric hospital. On the first night, in my dream, I entered the mind of a patient who stayed in the same room in 1964. On the second night, that patient entered mine. I've always been a lucid dreamer. Even as a child, I could recognize when I was dreaming, and sometimes control the dream's direction. What should have been a gift became a curse when the dreams turned violent. Night after night, I found myself trapped in increasingly disturbing dreamscapes, unable to wake despite knowing I was asleep. The diagnosis came when I was 28, oneirophrenia with REM sleep behavior disorder. In simple terms, my brain couldn't properly distinguish between dreams and reality during sleep. I would physically act out my nightmares, once throwing myself against my bedroom wall so hard I fractured my collarbone. By 30, I'd tried everything: medication, meditation, sleep clinics, even experimental therapies. Nothing worked. I averaged 2 hours of sleep per night and lived in constant fear of what I might do while unconscious. I lost my job, my apartment, my relationships. When Dr. Ellis contacted me about a new clinical trial, I was desperate enough to say yes before hearing the details. Only later did I learn what it entailed. The theory is environmental, she explained in her calm clinical voice. We believe that familiar surroundings reinforce dream patterns. Complete environmental disruption may reset the neurological pathways. And that means, I asked. 30 days in our research facility, a controlled environment with constant monitoring, no outside contact. We'll record your brain activity, sleep patterns, physical responses, everything. It sounded extreme, but what choice did I have? I signed the forms that afternoon. A week later, I was driven to the Institute for Sleep Disorders. As we approached, I felt a chill despite the summer heat. The facility was imposing, a sprawling Victorian-era complex partially hidden by towering pines. The main building had clearly been renovated with a modern glass entrance and new roof, but the wings extending from either side remained untouched, still bearing their original red brick and ornate stonework. Dr. Ellis met me in the lobby. Welcome. This was originally the State Psychiatric Hospital, established in 1892. It closed in 1976 and remained abandoned until our research group purchased it 5 years ago. You built a sleep clinic in an abandoned asylum? I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. She smiled thinly. We've renovated the central building completely. Only the east wing has been partially restored for this specific study. There's something powerful about repurposing these spaces for healing. She led me through the facility, explaining the various technologies they employed. Most of it went over my head, technical jargon about neural mapping and sleep architecture. What I gathered was that they'd be watching me, constantly recording everything from my brainwaves to my breathing patterns. Finally, we reached a heavy door marked East Wing to authorized personnel only. This is where you'll be staying, Dr. Ellis said, inserting a keycard. We've renovated one ward specifically for the environmental disruption protocol. The door opened, revealing a long corridor, noticeably different from the modern facility we'd just walked through. Though clearly cleaned and repaired, it retained much of its original character. High ceilings with exposed pipes, tile floors that echoed when walked upon, and walls painted that particular institutional green unique to old hospitals. This section housed treatment-resistant patients in the 1960s. Dr. Ellis explained as we walked. We've preserved the architectural integrity while modernizing the essential systems. At the end of the hallway, she opened another door, revealing a simple room about 12 feet square. A hospital bed stood against one wall across from a small desk and chair. A doorway led to a tiny bathroom. The windows were large but covered with ornate metal grills original to the building. This will be your space for the next 30 days, she said. Cameras in each corner will monitor you constantly. The headboard contains our neural recording equipment, which will activate when you lie down. Meals will be delivered 3 times daily. There's a panic button by the bed if you need immediate assistance. I set my small bag of permitted personal items on the bed. What exactly am I supposed to do for a month? Sleep, she said simply. Read if you like. We've provided some books. Write in your journal. But mostly we want you to sleep in this unfamiliar environment and Let your brain form new patterns. After she left, I explored my new home. The room had been thoroughly modernized in practical ways. Proper lighting, updated plumbing, climate control. But aesthetically, it remained frozen in time. The metal bed frame was likely original, though fitted with a new mattress. The desk appeared antique, its surface bearing decades of scratches and marks. On the desk, I found a leather-bound journal with a note from Dr. Ellis instructing me to record my dreams upon waking. Beside it sat a small stack of books, mostly classics I'd never gotten around to reading. That first night, I prepared for the usual struggle to fall asleep. To my surprise, exhaustion overcame me almost immediately. As consciousness faded, I had the strange sensation of the room shifting around me, going darker, older, the clean smell of disinfectant replaced by something medicinal and bitter. The dream began unlike any I'd experienced before. Usually, my dreams were chaotic, fragmented scenes that morphed illogically. This was different, coherent, structured, almost like a memory. I was sitting on a bed identical to mine, but the room was different. The walls were bare concrete, the window covered with chicken wire rather than decorative grills. A heavy door with a small observation window was the only exit. I recognized it as a mid-century asylum cell. More disconcerting, I wasn't myself. Looking down, I saw unfamiliar hands, male larger than mine with a small crescent scar on the right thumb. When I stood and caught my reflection in the small metal mirror, I saw a man's face, gaunt with hollow eyes and close-cropped hair. Though I knew I was dreaming, I couldn't control this dream or wake myself as I usually could. I was merely an observer experiencing someone else's reality. A name came to me, Daniel Hayes, born 1937, patient number 471. How did I know this? It wasn't like recalling information. It simply existed in my consciousness as if it had always been there. The door opened and a white-coated doctor entered, accompanied by an orderly. "Good morning, Daniel," the doctor said, consulting his clipboard. "How are the new medications working?" My mouth, Daniel's mouth, answered without my volition. "The voices are quieter, but I can't feel my fingers." The voice was deep, roughened by cigarettes. "That's progress," the doctor said, making a note. "We're going to try something new today." The scene shifted and I was strapped to a table in a tiled room. The doctor stood over me, preparing a syringe while explaining something about experimental protocols and treatment-resistant cases. Fear flooded through me, both mine and Daniel's inseparably merged. As the needle pierced my arm, I jolted awake in my own body in my room at the institute. The clock read 3:17 a.m. My heart was racing, sweat soaking my clothes. I fumbled for the journal and began writing frantically, capturing every detail of the dream before it faded. Something told me this was important, that I needed to remember. I managed to fall asleep again around dawn, but thankfully without dreams. When I woke, a breakfast tray had been left on my desk along with a note from Dr. Ellis requesting a meeting at 10 a.m. In her office, she reviewed my journal entry with clinical interest. Fascinating. The level of detail is remarkable, particularly the patient name and number. "Is that significant?" I asked. She hesitated. "Possibly. We'll check the historical records. This building has housed thousands of patients over its history." It felt real, I said. Not like a normal dream. More like I was accessing someone's memories. "The mind is complex, especially during sleep," she replied non-committally. "Let's see if the pattern continues." That day passed slowly. I read, attempted to nap without success, and paced my room thinking about Daniel Hayes. Was he a real person? Had he actually been a patient here? The dream had felt so authentic down to details I couldn't possibly know. the medications, the doctors approached, the layout of the room in the 1960s. Night came. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, dreading sleep yet craving it. I needed to know more. Eventually, exhaustion won. This time the transition was faster, more fluid. One moment I was in my bed, the next I was Daniel again, but in a common room filled with patients in various states of sedation. Through his eyes, I watched attendants distribute medications, played chess with another patient, though I had no control over the moves, and stood in line for electroshock therapy, my heart pounding with borrowed terror. I experienced fragments of Daniel's life. His arrival diagnosis was schizophrenia with paranoid features, his treatments both standard and experimental for the era. Most disturbing were his interactions with Dr. Reeves, the physician I'd seen in the first dream. Reeves seemed particularly interested in Daniel's case, noting his unique neural architecture and responsiveness to the new protocol. I woke at exactly 3:17, again drenched in sweat, but energized by a strange exhilaration. I wrote everything down, filling pages with Daniel's experiences. The dream had been even more vivid than before, with sensory details that seemed impossible for my mind to fabricate. The specific taste of the medications, the distinct smell of the hydrotherapy room, the exact pitch of the bell that signaled meal times. At my meeting with Dr. Was Daniel Hayes a real patient here? She sighed, setting aside her tablet. Yes, we've confirmed it. Daniel Hayes was admitted in 1963 and remained here until 1966. What happened to him? His records indicate he was transferred to another facility. Her tone suggested there was more she wasn't sharing. These dreams can't be coincidence, I insisted. I'm somehow accessing his actual experiences, things I couldn't possibly know. The mind is suggestible, she countered. Being in this environment, knowing the building's history, it's natural your dreams would incorporate elements of that past. But we both knew this was different. The specificity, the consistency, the emotional resonance, these weren't fabrications of my imagination. That night, I both feared and anticipated sleep. Would I connect with Daniel again? Learn more about what happened to him? The questions followed me into unconsciousness. The dream began differently. I was Daniel, but the scene was unfamiliar. I was strapped to a chair in a room I hadn't seen before with strange equipment surrounding us. Dr. Reeves was adjusting dials on a machine while speaking to another doctor. Subject shows remarkable receptivity to the procedure. The temporal connections are stronger than in any previous participant. Are you certain it's safe? The other doctor asked. After what happened with subjects 12 through 15? Science requires risk, Reeves interrupted. Besides, 471 is different. His mind has the architecture we've been looking for. He can serve as the bridge. They placed electrodes on Daniel's head, strange, circular ones I didn't recognize as medical equipment from any era. As they activated the machine, Daniel's perception began to fragment. Images flashed before us, places, times, people he couldn't know. I realized with horror that they were my memories, my life, my experiences. Somehow, in 1964, Daniel Hayes was seeing the future, seeing me. I woke screaming, the panic button flashing as attendants rushed in. It took 2 sedatives to calm me enough to explain what I'd experienced. Dr. Ellis was called immediately, arriving disheveled in the middle of the night. He saw me. I gasped, still shaking. In 1964, he saw me here in 2023. Reeves did something to him, made him a bridge, whatever that means. Dr. Ellis's professional demeanor slipped for the first time, revealing something like fear. Perhaps we should pause the study. No. The vehemence of my response surprised us both. I need to know what happened to him. She reluctantly agreed to continue with increased monitoring. Before leaving, she paused at the door. Try not to sleep if you can, at least for tonight. I tried. God, how I tried. I read paste splashed cold water on my face, but by 2 a.m. exhaustion won out and I fell into a restless slumber. The dream was waiting. But something was wrong. I wasn't Daniel looking out. I was myself in my room. Yet it wasn't quite right. The walls were darker, dirtier. The modern additions were missing, and sitting on the edge of my bed was Daniel Hayes, looking exactly as he had in the mirror in my dreams. "You came," he said, his voice matching the one I'd spoken with in previous dreams. "I've been waiting." "This isn't real," I said, though I knew it was more than a simple dream. "Not real." He laughed, a hollow sound. "I've been reaching across time for decades waiting for someone to occupy this room with the right mind. And here you are, finally." "What did Reeves do to you?" I asked. Daniel's face darkened. "Tried to make me a conduit. Their little experiment in temporal consciousness. They wanted to reach forward in time, communicate with the future. It worked, but not how they expected. I don't understand. Reeves thought time was linear, that they could send messages forward like dropping a letter in the mail." Daniel stood moving around the room, touching objects, examining them. "But time isn't a line. It's a room, everything happening at once, and some of us can move around in it." A chill ran through me. "What do you want from me?" He turned, fixing me with those hollow eyes. "A way out. I've been trapped here since 1966, not dead, not alive, just waiting. But you're my door." "Door to what?" His smile was terrible to behold. "To now, to freedom, to a new life." He lunged toward me, our bodies colliding in impossible dream physics. There was a sensation of falling, of merging, of being unmade and remade. Then nothing. I woke to Dr. Ellis shaking me, her face pale with concern. "You've been unresponsive for almost 18 hours. We were about to transfer you to the medical wing." I sat up slowly, taking in my surroundings. The same room, same bed, same monitoring equipment, everything normal. Except nothing would ever be normal again. "I'm fine," I said, my voice sounding strange to my ears. "Just needed the sleep, I guess." She studied me with professional concern. "Your neural patterns were unlike anything we've recorded. Are you sure you're feeling all right?" I smiled reassuringly. "Never better, actually. I think your treatment might be working." After she left, I went to the small bathroom and looked in the mirror. My face stared back, but the eyes were wrong, older, haunted. When I raised my right hand, I wasn't surprised to see a small crescent scar on the thumb that hadn't been there before. "We did it, Daniel," I whispered, watching my reflection smile with an expression I'd never worn. "Yes, we did," my mouth replied in my voice, but with his intonation. "Now we just need to convince them to discharge us. Shouldn't be hard. After all, your sleep problems seem to be cured." In the mirror, my face grinned with two minds behind the eyes. The treatment had worked perfectly. I'd never have trouble sleeping again. After all, I was never really alone anymore.